You're listening to the Collapsed Wave Function, a chemistry podcast from the Brachiolope Media Network.
People don't like the idea of science being connected to their food. It's a really uncomfortable idea. People are really comfortable that their medicine is based on science, or their technology is based on science, or their car is based on science. But when you get the idea of food comes up, everyone thinks it should be just completely natural, and any scientific intervention is a bad thing.
If you wish to make Greek yogurt from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Welcome to the Collapsed Wave Function podcast. I am your host, Chad Jones. I'm a physical chemist at Brigham Young University, and guys, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I am almost there. Joining me as always is Sam Matthews.
Hello everybody, I recently graduated with my master's degree in organic chemistry.
And Doria Reeser.
Hey everyone, I have a PhD in environmental chemistry, and I'm also studying visual communications.
And joining us for this episode is Dr. John Copeland. John, you're a professor of food science at Penn State. You know, John, I'll be honest, I've kind of wanted to invite you on the podcast for a while. I've kind of followed you on Twitter, and I kind of like your take on a lot of food science questions that come up. So thank you for agreeing to come talk to us.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here. I think it's an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today a little bit about yogurt. Now, if you're not on Twitter, you may not be aware of the recent controversy that's happened. But what happens is Chobani Greek yogurt has a campaign that they were doing where they have, clever sayings at the bottom of their lids. And the one that kind of got them in trouble by the Twitter community is a lid that says, "Nature got us to 100 calories, not scientists. #HowMatters." And of course, that caused a little upset among the scientific community because, for one thing, calorie is a measurement of energy, which certainly is very scientific. And for two, they have to have plenty of food scientists working for them. So, I don't know, John, what are your thoughts on this particular Twitter kerfuffle that happened?
I was surprised it happened, and you get an awful lot of this stuff now. Of people...
You were surprised that the kerfuffle happened?
Yeah, sure. People don't like the idea of science being connected to their food. It's a really uncomfortable idea. People are really comfortable that their medicine is based on science, or their technology is based on science, or their car is based on science. But when you get the idea of food comes up, everyone thinks it should be just completely natural, and any scientific intervention is a bad thing. And some of it comes from like the Poland type thinking about food, but I think where Poland will say something, it often gets taken far too extremely, and people end up thinking that any possible scientific intervention is a bad thing. So now you get food companies coming along, and food companies are incredibly responsive to what consumers want. They want to make foods that you're going to be comfortable eating, you're going to be able to find attractive. So they're going to come along and they're going to push this thing as being as natural, as wholesome, and put pictures of happy cows on the front and red barns, and everyone's going to feel wonderfully comfortable with all of this stuff. And they're going to try and hide the amount of science that goes into making this stuff because it makes their consumers unhappy. And most of the time, the food scientists who work for these companies are fairly okay with this because they're just going to recognize that this is the game being played. It's a branded good that's going on sale here. But then this happened, and I was really astonished that it was a scientist who posted a picture of this label, and then there was just an enormous response to it. People just found it silly, that the idea that you could be making stuff like this without using some science. And I don't know, as a food scientist, it was quite nice to be on the right side of a Twitter trend for once.
Yeah.
I am curious to know how many of the consumers were scientists that were upset compared to not scientists. Does anyone have any idea of that?
The people I saw getting excited were scientists, typically not food scientists. There aren't many food scientists on Twitter. But anybody who's got like science in their job title seemed to just get riled up by this. I think it's pushed a button that I'm doing all this work and I'm not properly appreciated for what I'm doing, and I should be. And good. I think people should appreciate there are problems in the world we live in. But there's an awful lot of really good stuff we get by people applying scientific principles to make the natural world a safer and happier place for us to live in. So it did seem to me a response of scientists to this. I don't know, but yogurt has got a history which goes way, way back, and people reckon that we ate yogurt long before we started to drink milk. In some ways, there's more science in making milk that's safe to drink than there is to make yogurt. And if you were living any time before the 20th century, milk is just a dangerous product to drink because they hadn't worked out pasteurization and distribution. I mean, my grandmother would talk in Liverpool about the milkman coming around with a jug of milk and pouring however much milk you need for the day. It wouldn't be pasteurized. It's you'd use it that day and it would decompose that day, and you'd hope it would decompose with something that wasn't toxic. If you go back to civilizations before that, milk was consumed as a cultured product, and a lot of the yogurt formation is a way of giving it some stability. Milk's one of these really interesting products that if you can get these lactic acid bacteria to grow into it, it stops all the bad stuff growing. And a lot of other foods that spoil, like meat, when they spoil, there's the potential of growing some quite nasty stuff. When milk spoils, you can get it to spoil with lactic acid bacteria. It turns it into yogurt or cheese, and you're great. So when you talk about like early dairying, probably people didn't consume fluid milk that much.
So I have a question related to that, and this is maybe going a little bit outside of food science and maybe going into the science of food consumption, but I remember reading somewhere that humans have had to evolve the enzymes that allow them to consume milk as adults, and I'm wondering I know that lactose that early humans weren't able to consume, and I'm wondering, was the reason why they had cultured milk first and then liquid milk second also partly because we hadn't yet evolved the capacity to consume liquid milk in our early history?
I think you need to find a historian to sort of argue that stuff out. But I did have the opportunity to visit a lab in Bristol University, a chemistry lab there, where they're using stable isotope mass spec, and they were doing organic extractions on these little shards of clay that they found in archaeological sites. And they were looking for the lipids which are characteristic of milk.
Oh, that's cool.
It's ridiculously cool. I mean, the quantity of GC equipment they had to do this stuff was amazing. And it's a huge, huge lab with the most sophisticated stuff I've seen. So they would find these shards of pottery in the Sahara Desert, take them back to Bristol, wash them out with an organic solvent, work out what lipids there, and they could work out from the stable isotope ratio whether it was a muscle lipid, so this pottery had been used to hold meat, or it was a dairy lipid. It's been used to in some sort of dairying thing. And this one they had was a clay pot, lots of tiny holes in, which they infer was for draining the whey out of cheese. When you curdle the milk, you want to let some of that water run out. They reckon that there was someone, 6,000 years ago in what's now the Sahara Desert, tending their cows or their goats and making cheese out of it. And they could infer all of this stuff by these little stains which were left on the pottery thousands of years later. It's almost spooky to think about it, just how you can look back into someone's life and infer it from just these shattered remains that were left. So it was probably a cultured product they were eating back then.
That is the science that you don't ever think about. You hear these, you hear scientists say, well, we know that people were eating such and such as far back as 100,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago is ridiculous. But anyway,
this stuff ties into how this lactase persistens gene spread through the human population. Because it's in most mammals, you get to be able to digest lactose for a short period of time. Then your body forgets how to do it. You stop secreting the lactase enzyme. But some populations of humans, and Northern Europeans are one of them, learned to do this. And they reckon it was around about the time of the Ice Age. And this guy has all these wonderful ideas about how quickly this gene spread through the population. And he suggests that people must have just starved to death if they couldn't do this stuff. There was a capacity to produce food when everything else was going pear-shaped. And again, you get these wonderful echoes of human history, that there must have been some ghastly Scottish bog thousands of years ago, where some tribes were able to feed their children milk, and the children grew up and survived, and some tribes couldn't. And my people now, I can still drink milk because of that.
Thank goodness for those Scottish bogs.
So those Scottish bogs, you can't beat them.
That was really interesting. And to just go back to Sam's question, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think that if you are lactose intolerant even now, because you don't produce lactase, and it's sort of similar to historically, that you still can't eat yogurt. And so I would imagine that the two things are still different, and that it was more related. Eating yogurt back then was more related to what John was originally talking about, which is that yogurt
it's spoiled in a safe way.
Yeah, exactly. It was something safe to eat.
Yeah.
Lactose tolerance isn't a sort of on-off thing. There are some people who are very lactose intolerant, some people who are moderately lactose intolerant. Yeah. And certainly, culturing milk turns lactose into lactic acid, which isn't as scary for our intestines to deal with.
Exactly. So I know a lot of cheese products are safe for lactose intolerant people to eat. I don't know about yogurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
but it typically reduces the amount of free lactose.
And there's certain types of yogurt as well that I think are easier for people to digest, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Well, let's talk about this though. The only two important types of dairy really are cheese and ice cream. That's the only that's the only parts of dairy you really need to care about.
Oh, I beg to differ, Chad. Having just gotten back from a month in Italy, I would have to say that gelato is a separate and distinct category from ice cream, and it's definitely just as, if not more important than either cheese or ice cream. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on that.
Say, as a vegan, I just want to plug in coconut milk ice cream as is an amazing, delicious product.
That does sound amazing.
Okay, John, your favorite dairy? What's your favorite dairy, John?
Oh, it's got to be cheese.
Cheese.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many things you can do with cheese. It's not just one thing. I was in France last year, and I don't think they have bad cheese in France. They seem to have a rule about it. And every single one would be different and distinct and wonderful stuff. Cheese is amazing.
You know, I had an interesting experience because I really love cheese, and I really love, like when cheese gets a little bit bitter, I like a bitter cheese. I like strong cheese. Not many people really, at least not in America, not a lot of people
Most
are
Americans are boring about cheese.
They don't eat a lot of sharp, really bitter type cheeses. So I was at Costco one day, and they were giving out samples, and there was this cheese, and it was a cheese I had eaten before, and I put it in my mouth, and it was just like it was bad. It was not good cheese, but it was strong, and there was everyone around me. It was sort of like this Emperor's New Clothes thing where nobody wanted to admit that they were not sophisticated enough to enjoy this cheese, and they're all saying, "Oh man, this is really good cheese." I'm like, "No, I've had this cheese before. It's
gone bad."
This particular one you're eating is actually not.
Yeah.
I would not eat it. But anyways.
And there's a huge amount of work which is done on steering that cheese to be better. I mean, if you go to the traditional cheese cultures in France and places, how the cheese ends up tasting the way it does depends on the bugs that grow on it.
Yeah.
So the bacteria which ferment the milk and the molds which grow on the surface, and even the little mites which chew their way through the rinds of the cheese, affect how it tastes.
I did not want to know that.
Cool.
Well, you do not want to Google cheese mite. The picture will make you unhappy.
You know I'm going to have to now, though.
But like in the US now, there's an awful lot of food scientists looking at how the genome of the bacteria and the yeasts and molds gives it different capacities to digest proteins. Because the yeasts and the mold and the bacteria are eating the milk to try and grow. And some of their products are bitter. So certainly in a cheddar cheese, you want this sort of strong cheesy flavor, which comes from breakdown of all sorts of milk components. But you want to be careful of the bitterness. So they're looking for strains of bacteria which are going to not produce these bitter peptides.
And is it known what makes those? Well, I was actually going to say, is it known what makes the peptides bitter, or is it just empirically that this particular whatever has a bitter taste? Is there theory behind it, or is it empirical? I guess
there is theory.
I don't know if I'm asking you too much beyond your specialization.
There is theory about it. It's not particularly predictive. We've made huge steps in the last very few years in working out the receptors on our tongues which are able to detect bitter. So what are the proteins which are secreted on the surface of your tongue which bind molecules which tell your brain that there's a bitter compound being detected there? So once you know what the lock is, you can start to guess what the key is going to be.
Oh, okay.
People are getting far more predictive about, well, a peptide of this sequence will be bitter, a peptide of that sequence will not be bitter. And there is some information there about being a little bit more predictive about, okay, if this bug can make this protease, which can make this peptide, then I expect it's going to taste bitter. It's clever stuff.
That's really interesting.
So, I mean, you kind of already mentioned a little bit, but there's a lot of science that goes into understanding and creating the flavors of the foods we eat and enjoy. Mm-hmm. So what is a process that maybe not a lot of people realize happens in food science, but that actually takes a lot of work?
Making flavor, and there's an awful lot of ways of getting into a question like that. And you can think about the food you make in your own kitchen, how it tastes. When you could talk about, well, how many ways could you cook an egg? How many ways could you bake bread? And you know that if you change the ingredients that go into it, if you change the cooking conditions, you can steer the tastes in different ways. What you're doing without knowing it is steering chemical reactions to produce different types of molecules, which is going to make a fried potato chip taste better than a boiled potato. If you're working in the food industry, you want to try and get that stuff under control. So you're looking to make your potato chips or your however other types of processed potatoes have the right type of taste within them. So you're trying to sort of steer that chemistry along. So you're making the right blend of molecules. When you come across a product like Chobani, they've added some natural flavors to their product. So what they've probably done is contracted with a flavor house who've extracted cherry flavors, probably from cherries, but not necessarily from cherries, blended them together in a certain ratio, and added it to that yogurt white mass to give it a nice strong cherry taste. And you might like to think, oh, it would be far better if I could just take my natural yogurt. I could chop up a handful of fresh cherries from the tree in the garden, throw them into the yogurt, and it's going to taste great. And you're completely right. If you could do that, it's going to taste way better than the Chobani product. The trouble is, if you leave it sitting around for, I don't know how long that Chobani product's expected to last from its distribution center to your refrigerator, but it's going to be weeks. It's going to go kind of nasty over that time. The taste's going to degenerate, and it's not going to be a good product. So by strengthening up the cherry flavor, and also finding a cherry flavor which is compatible with yogurt base. I'm sure you know that if your perception of flavor occurs mainly in your nose, it's a smell we're receiving more than the sensation.
So you're going to have a flavor that is going to be released by the yogurt as you put it in your mouth then.
Yeah. So it's not the molecules that you put into the yogurt that matter. It's the molecules that get out again and go up your nose that are going to be the important ones. So you have to start thinking, well, is my low-fat yogurt or my Greek yogurt going to bind those flavor molecules better or worse than the standard yogurt or the high-fat yogurt I was making before? Lots of thought goes into that.
So the question I have is, Chobani will also say that they use no preservatives. But how can you do something that has no preservatives and yet it can be preserved long enough to go through their shipping process to the store and still be good for at least a week or two in my fridge?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to take you back to a Scottish bog, I'm afraid.
You said a Scottish barber?
Scottish bog.
Oh, bog, okay.
It's the same, the fact that these lactic acid bacteria growing up, they're dropping the pH of the food quite dramatically. Yogurt's a fairly acid food. It's a very, very unflavorable environment for anything else to grow in it. So yogurt, even if it goes beyond its spoilage, its specify date, it's probably not going to be growing anything too disgusting in it. That's going to give you a problem.
Lactic acid.
Because of the lactic acid, because of some of the peptides that the bacteria make, to try and cut down the competition, they want to have this little ecosystem just for themselves, and they really are fighting hard to exclude any competitors from their space.
So is it standard that a yogurt would not need preservatives then?
Yogurts rarely need preservatives. I haven't looked as thoroughly as probably I should, but typically not.
Okay.
For making yogurt, and correct me if I'm wrong, are sugars needed for the fermentation process?
There's enough there naturally. I mean, what will
I meant natural sugars.
Sure.
But,
yeah. So
there are natural preservatives in there, basically.
Well, and the lactose which is there is going to get fermented to lactic acid. And lactic acid is the best antimicrobial we've got.
Mm-hmm.
Without the lactic acid present, it's going to spoil real fast. But the sugars you're going to add, that some people add to these kind of formulations, are just to make it sweeter. And I think it's because this market tends to expect yogurts to be like a sweet dessert type item, whereas if you're in different parts of the world, you'd be thinking of yogurt in a totally different way for different culinary uses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to go back just a little bit. I want to read some of my favorite tweets from this Chobani. So some of my favorite tweets. There was actually another foil topping that didn't get as much attention as the no scientist one. It says, no ingredients should have a number in it. #how matters. And I think that's a little funny. I've always found the argument that you should be able to pronounce your ingredients or it shouldn't have a number in it to be a little silly because, vitamin C, if I give the IUPAC name for that, if I give the scientific name for vitamin C, going to have a number in it, right? Then this one by Joe Hansen, at J to the Izzo. He says, if you wish to make Greek yogurt from scratch, you must first invent the universe.
Found that one.
Thank you, Carl Sagan.
I really like that one. There's Tree Lobsters, at Tree Lobsters says, the opposite of science isn't nature, it's ignorance. And I like that one too. Let's see here. Oh, and then somebody did some editing to the original foil thing, and instead of having the thing that says nature got us to 100 calories, not scientists, they said marketing got us into this PR disaster, not scientists.
I would love to talk to some of the food scientists at Chobani over a beer. I think there must be some conversations being had there.
Mm-hmm.
Most underappreciated food scientists in the industry.
Well, and my first thought was that's got to feel at least a little bit insulting that you're working for a company whose primary marketing strategy is to pretend the work you do is non-existent. But you kind of mentioned, John, that that's sort of the standard.
I think it is, and it's. I don't know. I find it a pity. I wish we could get to a place for being a bit more mature when we talk about foods and recognize that we are eating chemicals, we're made of chemicals, and we're getting an awful lot of things, good and bad, from the foods we eat.
So the last tweet that I wanted to read was a tweet from Karen James at KE James, and she says, "I figured out why that Chobani lid bugs me. It portrays scientists as anti-nature, but my love for nature is why I do science." And I think that to me sums it up pretty well. At least a lot of my thoughts is that it's not we're not the natural world is sort of what science is seeking to understand, and so saying that science is the opposite of nature, that doesn't make much sense.
I think natural is just not a helpful paradigm to think about when you're dealing with food. We're always working on our environment, trying to make our environment better for us. The natural environment for a overweight middle-aged man like me, I do not want to live in the natural environment. I'm going to die.
It's trying to kill you.
It is, and it's a competitive place, and this is how we compete in this environment. I think we need to be thinking about what are the appropriate steps for making the food we want to eat. And it's not a natural thing we're going to eat. But if Chobani can come along and say, look, I've made a yogurt which has got less sugar in than an alternative formulation, good. I think they should be proud of it. I've made a yogurt which has a higher fiber content than another formulation. I've made a yogurt which has got live cultures in it. And whether live culture is going to have huge benefits for the population, I don't know. They probably are. That's a good thing they should be proud of. It seems a pity that they have to pretend it's natural in order to get people to accept it.
I have one tweet that I wanted to share too.
Okay.
That you didn't read. That it's by @sarcasticrover.
Oh, I did see that one. That was excellent.
Yeah, it says @Chobani and their semi-divine ability to produce yogurt got us to Mars, not scientists.
That one was quite good. Well, John, I had a question as somewhat of a segue. I've asked you several questions and prefaced them by this might be going out of your area of expertise, but I wanted to go into your area of expertise now and say you're a professor of food science, so I wanted to ask what exactly is it that you study? What interests you about the science of food?
I'm interested in physical structure of foods. So I always wish I was the kind of food scientist who could come along and say, I make chocolate or I make bread, but I don't, unfortunately. I'm interested in how molecules interact with food structure. And at the moment, you're sort of saying, well, when's he going to get to cheese or ice cream or something like that?
So when you say food structure, are you talking about like how to influence the mouthfeel of something, or am I completely misunderstanding what you're saying?
Okay,
yeah, or do you cook foods or...
I like emulsions. I'm interested in fine dispersions of oil in water, and I'm interested in how they change the chemical reactivity of foods.
So mayonnaise.
So mayonnaise is a good one. So if you start to if you want to make a mayonnaise I never make mayonnaise. If you want to make a mayonnaise and put some antioxidants in there to stop the oil going rancid, or because you think antioxidants have some sort of health benefit, what is it about the structure of the food which is going to change the reactivity of those antioxidants? So how are small molecules which are the antioxidants, going to interact with the different phases of the material, how they're going to interact with the interface. So we do physical characterization, we do light scattering to try and measure structure, we do calorimetry to try and measure crystallinity, we do oxidation assays, and we do electron paramagnetic resonance spectroscopy to try and work out sort of how small molecules and free radicals are partitioning around a complex system. So yeah, mayonnaise kind of. That
is really interesting. We ended up talking about interfaces on a podcast a while back, and we mentioned that interfaces are kind of the final frontier, one of the final frontiers for chemistry, because a lot of what we know about solution or gas phase chemistry just goes out the window when we start talking about how stuff works on the interface. So that's really the unexplored area of chemistry.
And this is why chemistry kind of sucks, and because chemists come into life with this strange fetish about covalent bonds being the most important thing that possibly can happen, and reactions in solutions. I mean, whatever you're going to dissolve it in, it's a reaction in the solution. And okay, yes, sometimes there's a reaction in the solution between covalent bonds and small molecules. Life is about surfaces and about structures and about molecules partitioning in odd ways. And food is all of that. Yes, it's important to understand the mechanism, the organic mechanism in an organic solvent, and yes, we can understand this stuff. But how is it happening in a cell? Cells are complicated, and they were made complicated for a reason.
When you said that chemists look at covalent bonds in an organic solution, I was going to say, no, I study non-covalent bonds in the gas phase, but you didn't quite.
I would high-five you if I could over Google Hangouts.
Yeah. So what is the biggest unanswered question in your field of food science that would be like the if it were answered would awe everybody around you?
Oh, I'm going to step outside my particular area, but I think something I think would be really, really cool to know is what is it about a diet rich in fruit and vegetables that gives health benefits? And that's pretty well established. I don't think anyone really argues that we should be eating more kale. We don't do very well when we start extracting these molecules and adding them back into foods and generating the same kind of health benefits. We can extract the molecules, put them in cell cultures, and they do amazing things. We can extract the molecules, test them in specific populations, and you can get some interesting effects. But what is it about eating a diet? What is it about kale that's making people do so much better on that? Because I think if we were in a position to understand that, then we'd probably be doing better on these big population heart disease, cancer type of things. We'd be able to formulate our foods in such a way that we'd be eating more foods that our evolved brains want us to eat.
Yeah, and we could get the benefit of kale without having to eat kale, which I absolutely hate.
Aww.
I'm thinking, well, then I'll be able to have a pizza with the benefit of eating a strawberry, and Doria is probably just looking at me thinking, well, just eat the strawberry, but
you can put strawberries on your pizza.
Yeah, no, I say strawberries. I really love strawberries, but
Chad, you can put strawberries on my pizza. I cannot. However, I think my wife would slap me. My wife is from Venice and is very protective about the right way to do pizza.
Yes, you're only allowed about 3 ingredients, and they've got to be good.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't show her my strawberry pizza picture on Facebook, then.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what you would think about as cheese anyway. So,
yeah. You have a strawberry pizza? Did that?
It was like a dessert pizza that I made with strawberries, blueberries, and walnuts.
Because I just pulled that example out of the air, but apparently you would.
I wasn't lying when I said you could put it on pizza. You can put whatever you want on pizza.
That's true.
I feel kind of sorry for Chobani and all this stuff. And they worked really hard to put this product out. They recognized that the position they wanted to put this in was a more natural product. They came up with lovely packaging, and then this hit them. I think they handled it with some grace.
I think so too.
We should hold a contest to give Chobani replacement slogans for the bottom of their fruit cups.
I'm sure they're not looking for help right now.
Yeah, they no, but I mean their apology did seem pretty forthcoming and immediate. You know, I mean the very next day they also went on to talk about how their yogurt is chemical free, which kind of re-stirred the pot for a couple people. But I do think that it was nothing more than a PR, PR problem that just happened to get out of hand, and I don't think it would be a fair statement to say that Chobani as a company is anti-science. I don't think that would be fair.
No, but it's interesting the position some of these companies get to. And you could see General Mills launched a GM-free version of Cheerios a few months ago. And I'm certain there's nobody in General Mills who thinks that genetically modified food is dangerous to eat.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting because if you look at the General Mills policy, if you look on their website to the policy, they have a specific thing that is very pro-GMO. Mm-hmm. However, it's like you mentioned, food companies have have to market very closely to what their consumers want, probably more than any other, because and so what happens is, you can have their policy is that they are a very pro-GMO company, and yet they'll still do this because that's what consumers are asking for, and that's how you make money, is by giving the consumers what they were willing to pay you for.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a really
It's like
good insight.
labeling. It's like labeling foods fat-free that should obviously have no fat in it,
Yes.
or
Trans fat free. Yeah.
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 Fat-free flour.
hmm
Cool. Well, do we want to move on to the Fortnightly Scientist then?
Yeah, let's go on. Let's do the Fortnightly Scientist.
Okay.
Okay, so the Fortnightly Scientist, of course, is our section where we ask our guests to tell us who their favorite scientist is, and we let them interpret that however they want, whether that means living or dead, real or fictional, or let's see,
Overrated or underappreciated?
overrated, underappreciated, or overrated. So, John, who is today's Fortnightly Scientist?
I'm going to pick on Fred Achem. He was a German chemist living in London at the start of the 19th century, and he was a food chemist. He was one of the first people who started to worry about food adulteration. Food manufacturers, suppliers, putting things in food to give them properties they want. So he would do some actual real chemical analysis on this stuff based on sort of 1820s chemistry. So if you're making cream, you make cream by concentrating the fat phase of milk to make a very concentrated emulsion. The fat phase is the most expensive phase. People want to use it to make butter. So cream is a much more expensive product than milk. People would make a fake cream by just putting a little bit of starch in there to thicken it up. So you could thicken milk, and you could tell people it was cream. So Achem came along and he said, well, you can distinguish between adulterated cream and non-adulterated cream by doing an iodine stain. Iodine is going to show...
It's going to turn purple in the presence of starch.
Yeah, and he didn't know what was going on at that point, but it wasn't just... It was a real practical solution to a problem. It wasn't just sort of hand-waving, food manufacturers are awful. It was, okay, let's apply science in a meaningful way so we can make decisions about this stuff. And I think that was a big step forward. Another thing I really admire about him is he actually named the people who'd been caught in cases like this stuff. So he got into a lot of trouble because he wouldn't just say, food companies are doing this. He'll say, oh, Mr. So-and-so Fleet Street was caught adulterating his pepper with sweepings. And he published all this stuff. And he had decided to go back to Germany for a while after that because he became quite unpopular. So he's going to be my chemist of the Fortnightly.
Yeah.
So he was born in 1769. I'm seeing here. Does he get all the title of father of modern food science, or is there a title like that for anybody? Maybe in modern food chemistry. Pasteur and Appert from France also show up in the sort of early food preservation people, and so I guess they'd be important ones. I think as a chemist, though, I like Achem. First of all, for his sort of policeman role, actually finding out what was being done wrong with food, but also this sort of philosophical idea that food is a collection of chemicals, and the chemicals give the food properties. So I think if you were a very sort of natural-minded person, you'd look at milk or cream and say, okay, this is naturally what cream is. Cream is a thing. But Achem, by doing chemistry, could recognize, well, cream is a collection of properties. It's an opaque fluid. It's a viscous fluid, more viscous than milk. And the sensory properties which we appreciate in cream result from the chemicals which go into it. And you can manipulate that to give it the properties you want. And I think that's an awful lot of what's going on in formulated foods. And we were talking about Chobani earlier, and they were making a sweet yogurt by adding a stevia extract to it. They were substituting one chemical for another chemical to generate the same functional properties at the end. And I think that's a sort of philosophical outcome of Achem's work. But I think it's important in all our views of life that we are made of chemicals. We live in a world of chemicals. And the chemicals are what give food its properties.
Yeah. I also really like that he attempted not just to communicate this in the scientific circles, but he tried to make it, he tried to popularize it, and I love the Wikipedia article has a copy of his book, which is, it's quite terrifying. It's got a giant spider sitting in the middle of a spider web, and the title of the book is A Treatise on Adulterations of Food and Culinary Poisons.
It is. It's scary stuff, and dig it up in Project Gutenberg. It's surprisingly readable for a book written in 1820. And I wouldn't. It's not bedside reading, but you read through some of his chemical tests, and you could do that now if you wanted to. He gives enough detail on. Okay, this is a reasonable way of finding out if your vinegar's been adulterated with sulfuric acid.
Which that terrifies me that people actually used to do that.
And there's still you still get this sort of economic adulteration of people putting the wrong chemicals in here. Huge deal in Europe last year of horse meat showing up in all kind of places it shouldn't show up. There's some unscrupulous people out there who want to sell you something you can't tell the difference. Fish is awful. There's the amount of strange species being labelled as other species because honestly you can't tell. And so I think we need the heirs of Ackham to be doing the analysis to enable us to make rational decisions about our food.
Yeah.
All right, and that bell, of course, means that our time is up. No, that's not what it actually means. I don't know if you guys heard this bell here.
Vaguely.
But anyways, but John, thank you for coming on the podcast to talk with us. Like I said, I've been wanting you to come talk to us for a while, so I'm glad you agreed to come on.
Yes, thank you very much. If you'd like us to interview you about your research, you can go ahead and send us an email. You can get a hold of us at chad@thecollapsedwavefunction.com. You can also follow all of us on Twitter. Chad, your Twitter handle is?
@thecollapsedpsi. That's @thecollapsedpsi.
And Doria, how do we get a hold of you?
At Dr. Doria, DRDOREA.
And my Twitter handle is SamScoM. That's SAMSCOWM. It is not Sam's Cow M, but Sam Sco M.
It's Sam's Cow M.
And what is John's Twitter?
John N. Coupland. I haven't got much imagination.
Yeah. Well, it helps if you have a last name that's spelled differently than everyone else, because then you know that your handle hasn't already been taken. So, okay. And we will... Are we going to put any links to the show notes for this show, Chad? I'm trying to think what we...
Yeah.
There will be various and sundry links to the show notes at the bottom. Also, just as a reminder, in an upcoming episode, we will be... Chad, Doria, and I will be discussing the book that we are reading, Napoleon's Buttons. And if you'd like to read along with us and listen to the podcast, you can get a hold of that on Amazon, or you can listen to it for free on Audible, and you can get a free trial for audible.com by going to audibletrial.com/TCW.
Yeah, and we actually already have an email that was sent to us for the first person that she read all the way through Napoleon's Buttons and gave her review, so we'll read that when it comes time to do that podcast. But yeah, make sure to listen, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Yeah. Ciao.
Bye, listeners.
Welcome to my secret lair on Skull Crusher Mountain. I hope that you've enjoyed your stay so far. I see you met my assistant Scarface. His appearance is quite disturbing, but I assure you he's harmless enough. He's a sweetheart, calls me master, and he has a way of finding pretty things and bringing them to me. Surprised that you agree. If you could find some way to be a little bit less afraid of me, you see the voices that control me from inside my head say I shouldn't kill you.
Sorry about that. I bumped the power cord on my router and had to accidentally reset it.
Well, we said that what had actually happened was you all the talk of yogurt, you had to go get some, so you just left the conversation to go and get some yogurt.
I'll be back, guys.